All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Tonight is financial aid night. We have the pleasure of having Leila here with us tonight, Miss Ann Carmichael from Layla. She is going to be presenting the FAFSA, and then we're going to have another representative that's going to be presenting the CSS profile. Again, I'm Miss Wilson. I'm one of the counselors at Benjamin Franklin High School. Miss Bruno and Mr. Edwards are not here tonight, but I am here representing Benjamin Franklin High School. So if you all have any questions for me, I'll be here as well, but the most of the presentation is going to be put on by Layla and our other representative to go over FAFSA and CSS profile. But again, even if you don't see my face, I will be here the whole time if you have any questions for me. Myself and Miss Carmichael are going to be, admitting people into the Zoom meeting, but we're going to go ahead and get started in the interest of time to respect everyone's time. So I am going to turn it over to Mrs. Carmichael. Again, Ms. Carmichael, thank you so much. I know the parents appreciate it, students appreciate it, and we definitely appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. And before I get started, I want to apologize for my raspy voice. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, and I'm so grateful for virtual presentations. So I'm Ann Carmichael, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, and we'll jump right into the presentation. Now, you all might be aware already, and I'm sure you are, that the Louisiana Department of Education has mandated that all Louisiana public school seniors complete a FAFSA as part of their graduation requirements. And why? We get that question all the time. Why do I need to complete my FAFSA? Because it's your application for TOPS, the Pell Grant, Federal Work Study, Louisiana Go Grant, federal student loans, then private scholarships, and institutional aid as well. To talk briefly about federal student aid, there are free monies, borrowed monies, and earned monies that you could be eligible to receive. And by completing the FAFSA, you'll be considered for federal Pell Grants, and you can see all the dollar amounts here. The free monies are the federal Pell, the FSEOG, the TEACH grant, the Iraq and Afghanistan service grant. Then the earned money is, of course, federal work study, and then the borrowed money, direct subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans. So by completing the FAFSA, you could receive one or perhaps all of these. Now, these monies can be used at 2- and 4-year public and private colleges, community colleges, career and technical schools, for part-time and online courses. Now, who can submit a FAFSA? U.S. citizens with Social Security cards and U.S. nationals, those who have a green card or an arrival departure record, have battered immigrant status, or have a T visa. These last 4 categories are considered eligible non-citizens. But what if you do have documentation, but your parents do not? You can still submit a FAFSA. You will just use zeros anywhere a parent's Social Security number is asked for. Now, it should take only 30 to 45 minutes to submit your FAFSA if you have all the documents you need to complete the form. And those are going to include the student and parents' Social Security cards, because your name must be provided on the FAFSA exactly as it's printed on your card. Student and parents' 2021 federal income tax returns. All W-2s from employers. I got access. Okay, so you need your W-2s from 2021, both student and parents, because there's information on this form that might not be found on your tax returns. You need copies of your bank statements and other investment accounts. So be sure that you are gathering all of this information. And I want to talk to you briefly about the assets that you will be asked to report on your FAFSA, and then the ones that you do not have to report. Report the value of your rental properties, if you have any, balances of your trust funds, money market accounts, mutual funds and CDs, stocks, options, and bonds, 529 college saving plans, UTMA and UGMA accounts. Now, do not report the value of your family home or primary place of residence. If you live on or own a family farm, you do not have to report the value of that. Any small businesses with fewer than 100, or I'll say 100 or fewer employees, does not have to be reported. Don't report the value of your life insurance, 401k plans, pension funds, annuities, or non-education IRAs. And then have your list of colleges, because even if you haven't completed your admissions applications to those colleges, it's a good idea to go ahead and get your FAFSA data sent over to them, and they'll hold on to it until you complete the admissions process. Now, you can add up to 10 colleges each time you submit your FAFSA, and there are instructions in the form on how to do that. Pay close attention to any deadlines that the colleges might have for you. Most colleges have a priority financial aid deadline. There is a deadline to submit your FAFSA if you are considering the TOPS application. And then federal student aid has a deadline as well. Your counselors might have a deadline for you to meet that graduation requirement. So make sure you're checking with Ms. Wilson. You'll begin by creating your federal student aid ID. It's referred to as the FSA ID, and the student and one of his parents needs this account. You're going to use it to log in to your FAFSA, to sign your FAFSA. You'll also use it if you have any student loan balances. Once you complete your college experience, you'll be able to manage those using your FSA ID. This is your legal electronic signature for all federal student aid websites. So make sure you're recording it. You'll need it every year that you submit your FAFSA. The FAFSA does have to be submitted for every academic year that you are in college, but keep it in a very safe place and do not share it with anyone. I want to mention too that when you're creating your ID, use only your personal information, no shared information. Use your personal email address and mobile phone number if you have one. So let's jump in. We're going to go to the FAFSA itself. You'll go to fafsa.gov or studentaid.gov, and when you enter, this is the home page that you will see. You'll first be asked to identify your role. Are you the student? Are you the parent? Are you a preparer? What is a preparer? A preparer is someone who submits the FAFSA for you and you pay them to do so. But this is the free application for federal student aid. So hopefully with this evening's presentation and all the support that you're going to have after the presentation, you'll be able to do this yourselves. You'll be asked to log in and to identify yourself. I see our next presenter is here, so if you'll just give me one moment. I want to make sure that I'm going to give her a co-host responsibility as well. All right. Once you identify yourself, you're going to be asked to provide the student's username and password, their FSA ID. Now, when you're in the form, you will see that you'll have two options. There's the 23-24 FAFSA and the 22-23 FAFSA. Which one do you want to submit? Well, the 22-23 FAFSA is for students who are in college at, oops, got some background noise. Students who are in college this academic year. So if you're starting early, you might have to complete both FAFSAs. But to meet your graduation requirement and also to be prepared to start school this fall, this coming fall, you'll want to complete the 23-24 FAFSA. You'll be asked to create a save key, which is an additional layer of security. You'll use this save key if you do not complete the FAFSA in one sitting. You'll be asked to provide your save key each time that you log back in. So make sure you're recording this as well. The introduction page shows you topics that are going to be covered within the FAFSA itself. So take a look at those and then jump right in. You see that there are 7 sections that need to be completed before you can submit your FAFSA. You'll start with the student demographics section, where you as the student will report your personal information, your personal email address, not your school address, your home address, your current home address, your state of legal residency, and you'll be asked if you're a citizen or eligible non-citizen. Remember, we talked about those. Next, you'll be asked what your high school completion status will be. High school diploma, GED, what college degree are you going to be working on? A bachelor's, associate's, or certificate? Will you have completed your bachelor's degree in 23-24? Most of you will have to say no to this. I'm assuming all of you. And then even if you're taking AP courses or you've taken some courses on college campuses, you as a first-year freshman on their campus need to report that you've never attended college and you're in your first year. Here's the work study question. Are you interested? This doesn't obligate you to accept positions on campus, but it lets the financial aid administrator know that you are interested in being offered those positions if you're eligible. These jobs look great on your first professional resume, so please consider them. Then you'll be asked to provide your driver's license number if you have one, and you'll be asked if you are or ever have been in the foster care system. Now, this is important to report because there could be additional financial aid for those who have been or are in the foster care system. You'll be asked the highest school level completed by your parents. Why? Because there could be additional resources for you as a first generation college graduate. You'll be asked to report the name of the high school that you're attending. Make sure it's in the format that federal student aid needs it to be in order to give your school a notification that you've submitted your FAFSA. And then we will move on into the section where you begin to add your colleges. And if you have that list with you, it will expedite this process. You'll be asked to identify and report your housing plans for each campus. And then you'll be asked the student's marital status. If the student has any dependents. Then we're moving over into the dependency status section. And this is one that we get the most questions about. Are you an independent or dependent student for FAFSA purposes? And we're going to talk about the questions that you're going to be asked to consider to determine that. Are you the student going to be 24 or older by January 1st of 2023? Is the student married or separated but not divorced? Is he working on a master's or doctorate degree? Does the student have children who will receive more than half of their support from him? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces? Are you the student, a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? Are both of your parents deceased? Are you an emancipated minor, or are you in legal guardianship as determined by the state of Louisiana? Now, you're going to see a lot of legal and financial aid terms you might not be familiar with. So make sure when you're going through the form that you're looking over to the right hand side of every question. Beside the field, you'll see a question mark. Click on that question mark to get a better description and explanation of some of these terms. And I also want to note that legal guardianship is not the same as legal custody. So make sure you have your legal documents with you when you begin the FAFSA form. And the last question that you'll consider is, are you an unaccompanied youth who was homeless or at risk of being homeless? If you can answer yes to just one of these questions, you're going to be considered an independent student for FAFSA purposes, and you will not be asked to provide parental information. But what if you cannot answer yes to one of those prior questions, but you don't live at home with your legal parents? Should those parties, your grandparents or other relatives or perhaps neighbors or friends, should they report their information on the student's FAFSA? And the answer to that is no, unless they have legally adopted you. And then yes, they become your legal parents. So you want to try, if you're in a special situation like that, make every attempt to get your legal parents' information for the FAFSA form. If you cannot, you can still submit your FAFSA, but you're only going to be considered for federal student loans unless you contact your financial aid offices at every school that you're reporting on the FAFSA to let them know about your situation. They can use what's called professional judgment and try to help you to find some additional monies to help you complete that academic year. So as I mentioned, without providing parental information, dependent students will be responsible for working directly with the financial aid offices to receive anything other than federal student loans. And I just want to make sure that everyone is muted so that we don't have too many distractions. So you will see here, you will either be asked to provide parental information, or if you cannot, I am unable to provide it. The next question that we receive most often is, whose information should be reported in the parent demographics section of the FAFSA? So if your parents are married, that's easy. You'll report both of them on your FAFSA. If they live together, you report both of them, whether they're married or unmarried. Did you live with one parent more over the past 12 months? And that is if your parents do not live together. So if mom and dad have never been married and do not live together and are separated or divorced, you will select the parent that you've lived with the longest in the past 12 months to report FAFSA data to report their parental data on your FAFSA. If you lived with both parents and it was exactly the same amount of time, then you will select the parent who provided you with the most financial support over the past 12 months. Now, if the parent that you're living with is remarried, you will enter information about that legal parent only and the step parent, because federal student aid wants to get an idea of the financial standing of the household that the student has lived in the longest over the past 12 months. Parents will begin to answer questions about themselves. You'll enter information separately about parent one. If there's another parent or step parent in the household, provide the same information about that parent. What are your parents' what is their state of legal residence? And how many other dependents live in the household with your parents? How many children are in the household? And if they financially support another dependent, like a relative or someone else that they financially support, you can report that here as well. And are there any other students in college at this point that are children of these parents? Report that in this section. And you'll move on into the parent financial section. This is where you want to grab your 1040 or your federal income tax return from 2021, and you'll be asked to identify what type of return it is, what the tax filing status was. And it's important now to have that form in front of you, because we're encouraging you to use the IRS data retrieval tool. This makes it a lot simpler. Your information is going to be accurate, and you will diminish your chances of being selected for verification on your college campuses. So if you choose not to use the IRS data retrieval tool, you could be asked to request a tax transcript from the IRS for that tax year and provide it to each of the colleges listed. You will be asked which parent created the FSA ID, and that parent will log in and be directed to the IRS site. Now, you'll want to make sure that you are grabbing information from your printed tax return and entering it exactly as printed on that return when you're in the IRS site. The IRS needs to know that the person that filed that return is the person in their site. So whether you've moved or say your tax preparer misspelled something on your return, he put street instead of avenue, you must type in exactly what's on that tax return. You'll then be asked if you choose to submit your information and transfer it from the IRS into the Fafsa. And when you do so, you will see that many of the fields in the parent financial section are going to show transferred from the IRS. But there are others that need some manual attention, such as the parent income from work. So let's say your parents filed a joint return, or there are two parents that are going to report their income on your FAFSA. You'll grab the W-2s at this point. If there are more than one, manually add them. And for parent 1 and 2, you will enter their earnings from that tax year separately. You will be asked about any additional financial information on your parents. If they received any untaxed income, and you can see the question marks over to the right-hand side of each field. If you are not sure exactly what to report there, this provides a wealth of information, so use those question marks. And then parents will be asked to report their assets. Any cash, balances of savings or checking accounts, investments, any current businesses with 100 or more employees. So make sure that you've grabbed your asset statements and that you're reporting that information here. Now we're going to move over into the student financial section, where if the student earned money in 2021, he will be asked to report it exactly as his parents did. If he filed a return, he's also eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire section screen by screen because it looks exactly like the parent section, but just make sure you're not duplicating, you're not entering parent financials twice. It's almost time to submit your FAFSA, but I'm going to encourage you to review your FAFSA summary before you do so. This is a list of every question you were asked and your answer to each, and this is your opportunity to make any changes that you see need to be made. By using the hyperlink under each question, you can go back into that section and make that change. You want to make sure that the financial aid offices at your colleges have the most accurate data so that they can quickly process your financial aid. New this year is a demographic survey. There are some personal questions here that you are asked if you want to report. And then you'll be asked to agree to the terms of this contract. This is a federal document, so you do have to agree that the information you're providing is accurate to the best of your knowledge. You move to the signature section where the student will be asked to use his federal student aid ID to electronically sign, and one parent will be asked to provide his FSA ID. Now, if you are an eligible non-citizen or a parent who does not have an FSA ID because you do not have a social security number, there is an opportunity here to print and sign a signature page. It's called a wet signature. You'll send that directly off through the U.S. Postal Service to Federal Student Aid at the address printed on that page. And if the student has an electronic signature and can sign, then once you've printed that page, you can submit the FAFSA. Then Federal Student Aid will match up that wet signature with the student's signed application once it's been received and processed. Once you submit it, you'll see that you will automatically receive a confirmation pop-up giving you a wealth of information of what's going to happen next. Please either print this page or take a screenshot of this page. You'll want to make sure that you follow all the instructions and understand the process. It takes 3 to 5 business days to process your FAFSA. You will receive an email confirmation that your FAFSA has been submitted. And at that time, once it's processed, your schools, your colleges will begin to receive your FAFSA data. You should see your estimated expected family contribution, and this is not a dollar amount. This is a formula that Federal Student Aid sends over to the financial aid offices, and they can use it to determine your aid offer. You'll see your estimated eligibility information, which could include grant amounts, student loan amounts, but remember that these are just estimates. Federal Student Aid does not award your financial aid. That is in the hands of the college financial aid administrator. You'll see a list of all the colleges that you've listed on your FAFSA in case you want to go back and add a college later and you're not sure that they received your information the first time, you can do so. Now, what happens once your FAFSA has been submitted? The financial aid offices at your colleges will determine what your cost of attendance is there on their campus, begin to identify any grants or scholarships that they can offer you to attend their school, and determine your net price. And this is the amount that you are going to be responsible for paying for that academic year. Once you select your college, you'll want to accept your financial aid in this order. The free money, grants and scholarships. The earned money, federal work study, that doesn't have to be repaid either. And then your last resort will be student loans. I'm going to encourage you, because I know you're Ben Franklin and you've already been looking for scholarships, but continue that search, because the more scholarships you win, the lower your student loan balances are going to be. Check in your counselor's office or on her web pages for scholarships that she's heard about. She hears from organizations all over, religious and community groups, clubs that you might be interested in, or you might already have joined. You'll find scholarships there. The top scholarship, stay on track for the state's scholarship opportunity. Check with the admissions and financial aid offices at the schools that you're applying to. Nonprofit organizations
I'm on a
like
webinar. Can I
LELA.
call you back? Okay, you're there.
Local
Everything's
businesses and private
good?
companies.
Okay.
LELA is administering a nonprofit education loan program. So if you find that once you've exhausted all your opportunities for the free monies and grants and scholarships, if you need additional money to help pave that net price, check out LELA Choice at lelachoice.org. Again, this year, LELA has published the FAFSA completion guide and workbook for the class of 2023. We've published our parent guide to planning and paying for college and the seniors checklist for college planning. These are all free resources to all Louisiana high school seniors. So if you haven't already received these, please contact me directly and I'll be happy to send them on to you. 2 scholarship opportunities that LELA offers this year. First is the $1,000 FAFSA completion scholarship for all Louisiana high school seniors that complete their FAFSA. And then if you're planning to attend a college in Louisiana, you can apply for our Choose Louisiana scholarship. That information can be found at lela.org, or you can email me and I will send you a link to those applications. If you want to register and schedule a FAFSA completion session, it's free of charge. I'd be happy to get you on our calendar. Just scan our QR code or contact me directly. Again, my name is Ann Carmichael. This is our FAFSA helpline. Feel free to call us at any time and communicate with me at my email address, carmichael@lela.org. Now I can see that we already have quite a few questions in our chat room. I want to go ahead though first before we talk about the items that I already covered, and I want to give our next presenter, Ms. Charmaine Lazard-Talbert, our co-host responsibilities. She's going to talk to us about the CSS profile. Charmaine, would you introduce yourself and take over the floor?
Yes. Well, good evening, everyone. As Ann mentioned, my name is Charmaine Lazard-Talbert. I serve as the Director of Financial Aid, as well as the Interim Director of Enrollment Services at Southern University in Shreveport, Louisiana. I've had the opportunity to work as a financial aid administrator for a little over 7 years now, and I just love promoting financial literacy and giving back to my state. So on this evening, we're going to be talking about the CSS profile. Some things that I'm going to mention is going to be a repeat from what Ms. Carmichael has mentioned. As I'm going to always plug the FAFSA because that's my baby and that's what I deal with a lot. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And between Ann and I, once I've completed, we'll go in and we'll answer any questions that you may have. So let me make certain that I have the right screen shared. Okay, so on this afternoon, we're going to talk about applying for financial aid, the what, the why, the how, as well as getting started with completing your CSS profile and the best times to apply for aid and just common mistakes you may encounter along the way. So the key thing to keep in mind in the financial aid process, whether it's completing the FAFSA or the CSS profile, is you don't necessarily have to wait until you have an admissions acceptance letter to apply for financial aid. You can actually do that in tandem. Both applications will open up on Saturday, October the 1st, 2022, and you're going to be using taxed and untaxed 2021 financial information. Differences when you're looking at your FAFSA, that's all for your federal or your state aid, but institutions try to find a way to spread their endowed scholarships in a fair and equitable manner, and that's where the CSS profile gives them a closer snapshot and helps them in that decision-making process. So with the CSS profile, it's the College Scholarship Service Profile, or CSS, and it determines how much institutional aid a student is eligible for. So it is a supplemental application to the FAFSA. So for all standard aid, you do still need to have the FAFSA on file, but there is a list of schools across the US that does honor the CSS profile, and they use it in their decision-making process. This application, unlike the FAFSA, does support international students applying for institutional aid. And so when international students are reporting all of their income, they do it in their home currency and it's converted into US dollars. So the colleges that use the CSS profile use it to help understand a family's true financial need. And it helps ensure that the institutional aid is awarded in a fair and equitable manner. So they're sending it out to students who need it most. And then it just gives them an opportunity to collect key information from each student's parents, whether they're together or not. Unlike completing the FAFSA, if your parents are separated or divorced and they're not living together, on a FAFSA, they don't have to submit all of their financial information. It will be just a custodial parent. Whereas with the CSS profile, whether you're unmarried and living together, or whether or not you're unmarried and you're living in 2 different states, you would still have to provide all of that information for consideration. So again, with students completing the CSS profile, it's important for schools that use this in determining how to divvy up and administer their scholarship funds. So what I encourage students to do is you get your list of schools that you're interested in. Your heart is really set on those that have the best programs, the ones that you would be okay with, and then you're okay, these are my last resorts. And you always plug in with their financial aid office. Most institutions have a lot of great information on their web pages, including all their priority deadlines. Those are integral in applying for scholarships. So I would definitely check that out and get your CSS profile done as soon as possible. So to complete it, you're going to need some information. So first you need to make certain that the college that you're interested in is going to utilize the CSS profile. I know in the state of Louisiana, as of right now, the only institution that's utilizing CSS is Tulane. So you can check that information out on that particular college's website, or you can go to College Board. They have a list of all of their participating institutions and they update it regularly. You would need to make certain that you complete an application online at cssprofile.org. And students, and in most cases, their parents will still need to provide all of their information. So first, you'll need to log in with your account. So you'll use the student's account. And if the student does not have one, that's when you will create one. So just like with the FAFSA, having to have an FSA ID, you will need to have your own electronic login credential to complete this application. So you have to keep in mind, also like the FAFSA, you have to select the proper application year. So if you're looking to begin enrollment next fall, you will definitely need to have the 2023-2024 CSS profile completed. And so how will your family complete it? Each parent will need to have their own login credential. So they would go to the same website and they will select a sign in, and then from there, create an account. So keep in mind whether your parents are unmarried and living together, or you have a custodial parent in which you're living with and a non-custodial parent, which you may visit and they co-parent with your other parent, everyone would need to be on your CSS profile. So the cost associated with applying. So for non-custodial parents of domestic undergrad students, it's free, but the income would have to be up to $100,000. So outside of that, it's a $25 application fee for the first college selected and $16 for each additional college. And there's a $25 flat fee for a non-custodial household member. So I did mention about that waiver. So again, if your family's adjusted gross, so looking at the income between both your custodial and your non-custodial parent, if that income is under $100,000, you do not have to pay to complete the CSS profile. In addition to that, you're also qualified for a SAT fee waiver. And if you are one of those students that may have a special circumstance, such as an orphan or a ward of the court under the age of 14, you also qualify for this waiver as well. And so this is a glance of the information that's provided when completing the CSS profile. And it shows like the schematic of how it would go, starting from the student, putting in the parents' information, and then their academic information. And then it delineates from there and tells you the other information you may need. So before you get started, you need to make certain that you have some key documents on hand. So all of your tax information for the 2021 income tax year, make certain you have your user account credentials, and remember to save often as you're doing this application, and keep in mind the deadlines. Okay, so to get started, once you log in, you're going to start by putting in your information and also listing your citizenship status. So you have to make certain that your name is going to match as it appears on the Social Security card. And it's just like with your FAFSA, it does go through the Social Security Administration. So they're going to confirm that your first and last name, your date of birth, and your social matches with what they have in the system. So next, these are considered like some dependency status questions, and it's pretty similar to what you would see on the FAFSA application. So it's going to ask you, if you have any legal dependents, if you're a veteran, although you're over the age of 18 but not 24, are you in foster care or a ward of the court? Have you been emancipated, or are you considered homeless? So keep in mind, parents, if you're completing this on behalf of the student, you're answering these questions as the student. So with the homeless questions, it's going to go into a little more detail than what would be reported on the FAFSA. So it's 3 options that you will fall into. It's 3 options that you will fall into that you need to consider. Please mute our mics. I have a little feedback. Okay. So it's 3 homeless questions, and you just need to make certain that you thoroughly read it, and answer correctly, because it's just like with the FAFSA, there's different ways you would have to certify. It's different ways that you would certify that you're falling into one of these 3 categories. Okay, so once you go from there, you're going to be putting in the parental information. So you're going to be listing mom and then dad. So keep in mind with your parents, it's just like with the FAFSA, it'll have to be either your biological, adoptive, step parents, or your parents' partners, or legal guardians. So you have to list all of their information. And unlike with the FAFSA, it's only 2 slots. With this one, you can actually add additional parents. You can have up to 4 parents reported, so that could be mom and dad. And if they both remarried, their spouses. So in this scenario, Lexi listed just her mom and dad. And she's gonna put what country they live in. And so just like when you complete the FAFSA, schools have a federal school code, which your CSS profile, each school has their own unique identifier. By you putting their code on your application, once it's processed, you're actually giving them permission to view all of your information on this profile and then make a determination on the institutional aid to award to you. So it's different ways you can search for it. But like I say, you get together a list of schools that you're considering, and you can list as many as you can, as you would like, or you can go in later and make changes and take off the schools that you would not like to consider and replace them with ones that you would. And so again, make certain that you're selecting the correct school. Do not select a graduate school. There are some schools that they offer more than undergraduate programs. So definitely keep that in mind. With each school, it has like a snapshot about that school that populates. So just make certain that you're selecting the correct portion of that school. Just select the undergrad programs and not any professional or graduate programs. If you do make an error, like you select the right school but the wrong program, that can delay the processing of your application. So keep in mind, even if you're in a dual enrollment program and you earn college credits while in high school, when you're completing this application, you will still list that you're a first-year undergraduate student. And so with Lexi, she would still need to report her plans for each college, the year in school. If she has a student ID number already, she would list that, whether or not she's going to live on campus or off campus, and where she is in the admissions process. Now, as a dependent student, she will need to add all of her parents' information. So besides their demographic information, she's going to need to put their income, their assets, as well as the family members that is within their household. So with the tax information, it's very detailed. So you would still use whether it's a 1040, 1040A, or EZ. For the 23-24 CSS profile, you will again use the 2021 tax information. And so basically you're just going line by line, inputting the data elements off of that tax return. And so also you have to report the earnings from the W-2 forms. So especially if you have both parents on your CSS profile, make sure you have your 1040 and the W-2s handy, because some information that's going to be listed is not going to be readily available on the tax form. So for instance, with the tax deferred pensions and your retirement savings, that is actually going to be reflective on the W-2. Not easily is identifiable on your 1040. So those are things to keep in mind. If it's something also that your parent may not have or is not applicable to you, just make certain you put 0. You can't have any blanks on your application. Okay, So you're going to need to also put the expected benefits for the upcoming year. So this is off of the 22-23 CSS profile. So when you're projecting, you're going to have to put the income for the 2022. So right now you're reporting on 21 tax data, but when you're projecting, you're going to be putting the next year again. So that's 2022. So you're going to have to not only report your daily income, you have to also report your assets. So land, factories, furniture, building, equipment, any type of fixed assets, your home, investments, real estate ventures, businesses, farms, etc. You're going to also have to report your cash and savings on hand. So you're going to have to, in addition to reporting your demographic information and the parents' demographic information, you're going to have to list all of the persons who are a part of your parents' family. So any brothers or sisters, you would need to list them on the CSS profile. So you'll have an option to list all of the dependents. So as you see, you'll be listing the first and last name, the date of birth, and their relationship to the student. So it's going to go a little bit further. For each student that you list, or for each additional person in the household, excuse me, that you're going to list, you're going to put where they are in their education. So if they're in K through 12, you get to list the grade year and whether or not it's private. And so after Lexi went in and answered information about the parent's household, they're gonna go in and report the student's income. So it's gonna be the current income. You're gonna do some forecasting. So for that next year, as well as those same fixed assets as we're reporting for the parents. And so the last part, which is key, and this is similar to the FAFSA. Sometimes there are special circumstances that's not readily captured when you initiate this application. So if you have any changes to where it's going to impact your income and may make you potentially eligible for additional scholarships, you would definitely want to be transparent and listed on your application. So they do still have the COVID-19 box available, but if there's like changes in employment affected by a natural disaster, additional expenses of any sort, you're able to list it on this application. And if it's not one of the ones that's already listed, you do have the option to list other and then go into further detail. So you'll have a dashboard and it'll show you a snapshot of once you submitted your application. It'll show you the day it was submitted, the listing of colleges that you've listed, their codes, the submission dates. It'll even put the priority filing date for that particular school, and whether or not you have submitted payment. So when should you complete the CSS profile? It's just like completing the FAFSA. I say the earlier, the better. Each school has their own priority deadline that is listed on their website. And we use that priority deadline. I know especially at my institution, as I'm receiving additional funding, I look first at the students that are eligible, and then I look at when the FAFSA was completed. And I start and I award to those students first. And if I have additional funds available, then I go and I award to additional students. But the earlier, the better, not only with the FAFSA, but also with the CSS profile, especially since with this application, you're looking at institutional aid. So some common mistakes processors have encountered in reviewing the CSS profile. The biggest thing is applying for the wrong year. So if you decide to go to summer school and the school that you're interested in, I'm gonna just use Tulane as an example. Let's say you decide to attend Tulane for the summer semester and they treat summer as a trailer. It trails at the end of that 8 year. You would think, okay, I would need to complete the 2023, summer. You would think that you would need to complete the 2022 23-24. However, you will be coming in the 2022-2023 A year for that particular school. So because of that, you would need to go back and actually complete the 2022-2023 FAFSA and CSS profile. So using the right academic year is important because the aid associated with what you're trying to get for that particular semester is going to be tied to the application. Transposing of the numbers, so listing your date of birth incorrectly or even the social, that'll cause like a mismatch. Reporting the parents' data, tax data as the student and vice versa, or even duplicating that data, showing that you have more income in the household than you really do. Selecting a graduate school instead of an undergraduate program. Again, that will definitely delay your processing time. And then those dependency questions that I showed you, answering the status questions incorrectly. So these are the references I used and putting together this presentation. So you may want to take a picture or a screenshot because it does have their customer service number and their hours of operation. And this presentation will be shared. So you will also have it as a reference. And so I thank you for your time. Again, I have Miss Ann and myself up, the presenters and the panelists for this session. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And I know I did see a few questions that were in the chat.
We do have a question. Hi, Miss Wilson, one of the counselors at Ben Franklin. Is the FAFSA a prereq to complete the CSS profile? Is the FAFSA?
It's not a prerequisite, but I would always say, you know, I'm operating always in tandem. You know, as you're applying for admissions, definitely do the FAFSA because most schools are going to look at the FAFSA before they look at the CSS profile. But before you complete that CSS profile, when you're compiling your list of schools that you're interested in, or you're looking at schools based off of the program you would like to pursue, make certain that that school is actually participating with the CSS profile, because you may pick 10 schools and none of them are accepting that application. Or you change your mind, you decide, like I said, to go to Tulane and you didn't even realize that they were on the list. So I will put together a game plan and check and see who is actually honoring the profile. Honestly, it wouldn't hurt to complete it. Because if you do it now, especially in the month of October, November, based off of the schools I was looking at on College Board's website, you would meet their deadlines. So definitely the earlier the better, but it's not a prerequisite.
Okay.
Remember that the CSS profile is used for oftentimes institutional aid and endowments, as Ms. Talbert-Lazard mentioned. And the FAFSA is used for federal student aid.
Right. Next question. And I know this one, but I'll let y'all take it. Is there a separate application for TOPS or is that determined by FAFSA?
That's a great question.
I'll be happy to answer that one. I'm no TOPS expert, but I do know a lot about it. The FAFSA can be used as your TOPS application. Mm-hmm. So every time a student in Louisiana submits a FAFSA, the Louisiana Office of Student Financial Assistance has an agreement with Federal Student Aid, and they send that data to the TOPS office. That is basically your application for TOPS. Now you have to meet all the other requirements, but that triggers your TOPS award. If you do not choose to submit a FAFSA, you should complete the TOPS application on their website.
Yes.
And to also add to that, in addition, make certain you do your FERPA forms with your high school counselor. I sit on the board for with the Board of Regents, and I also process TOPS at my institution. And I see a lot of students where they're coming in, they're checking on their eligibility, and LOSPA cannot determine their eligibility. It doesn't have a disposition status or an eligible award. And that's because your guidance counselor is putting the forms out and you're not filling it out and submitting it back in a timely fashion. So they can't get it to LOSFA and they can't make a determination from that. So definitely create an account on Student Hub. They send a lot of great texts. They use Signalvine to keep students plugged in with their eligibility for TOPS. And they also provide a lot of great resources as well.
And that's parents and students, the e-collect form that we talk about in the parent profile. So the two things you need to do if you don't want to fill out a separate application for TOPS, as long as you do the FAFSA and you do the e-collect form, your information will be sent to TOPS. But if one or the other are missing, it won't be sent. And that's what she's referring to, because we have students that graduate and then they call back, you know, when it's time to enroll at college and they're like, wait, I didn't get my TOPS. Well, one of those two were not completed. And that's usually what happens. But if you do the e-collect and you fill out the FAFSA, your information will go to TOPS. And then TOPS determines if you get the award or not. But at least we can, you know, send everything over. Here's another question. Does the student have to first set up their FAFSA account and profile before the parent sets up his or her own? Oh, that's good. So does the student have to set it up before the parent sets theirs up?
No, they can each individually create their accounts at the same time. There are hundreds of thousands of people creating their FSA IDs, which takes me to a really important point. Get your FSA IDs now before October 1st, because it's going to be an incredibly busy time. So go ahead and get those IDs. Many times you'll find that you can't use the IRS data retrieval tool because the Social Security Administration has not verified your FSA ID yet. So get those IDs now if you want to hit the ground running on October 1st with your FAFSA.
And I do remember last year and the year before, probably every year I've been a counselor for the past 6 years, on that first and some of the second, I would always have students coming to my office saying, Ms. Wilson, the website is crashing because everybody's trying to get on there on the first. So don't wait to create that ID on the first. Go ahead and at least create the ID now. So on the first, you can go ahead and jump on there. That's usually helpful. Another question, if I have twins beginning college at the same time, where on the FAFSA does it allow a parent to note this as a financial obligation?
So you can actually note it in the household size. So it's gonna ask you the student in particular application that you're completing, that's going to automatically be 1. You as a parent is going to automatically be 2. But then there's going to be another field where it's going to ask for the additional persons. So you would list the number of persons in the household. The CSS profile is a little more detailed where you're actually listing the names and the date of births. All you have to do is list a number. After you do that, it's going to say, okay, the number of persons within your household that's in college. The student whose application you're completing, they're going to automatically be 1. So you would just increase that number to factor in for the twin.
Another question, why is there, oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something, Ms. Carmichael?
Oh, no, go right ahead.
Okay. Why is there such a rush to get the FAFSA in on October 1st?
Well, you have to remember, I know we all want you to do it on October 1st, and I have a funny story about a Ben Franklin parent from last year. Remember that these monies are awarded on a first come, first served basis, and that federal student aid grants just lump sums of money to all the colleges that participate in the program around the country. You don't want to wait. You want to be first in line to so that you'll be eligible, so that you will be awarded all the monies that you're eligible to receive. And last year, I always laugh at I know which schools they're going to be. A mom from Ben Franklin called me at 7:30 a.m. on October 1st, and she was having trouble and she was panicking because she was having trouble with the website. And I just said, I should have known it's some of those overachievers at Ben Franklin. So just make sure that you are getting it done early, and we all know why. Remember that the FAFSA is date stamped, so your colleges see when you submitted that form. And but don't beat yourself up if you can't get it done by 1 a.m. on the morning of October 1st.
Yes, definitely to add, it's just allows schools to distribute the allocations that they receive in a fair and equitable manner. So like I said, I always look at when the FAFSA is completed. In addition, I look at the residency. If it's a student that's coming from out of state, obviously their fees are going to be a little bit higher, as well as my students that may be in foster care or unaccompanied youth, because they don't really have that parental support, and students that are living on campus. But having it completed, the earlier the better, is helpful to the student, definitely.
And if you can't get in on October 1st, the date of the first, don't worry about that. Just try and get it in early, because the system on the 1st, it always crashes and does silly things. So don't worry about that, but just try and get it in early. Just don't wait until January, that kind of thing. Because like they said, it's first come, first serve, and each school gets a pot of money, and when the money is out, it's out. And maybe if you would have applied earlier, you could have gotten this certain grant, but now by the time you applied late, the school doesn't have it anymore. I've seen that happen. So that's kind of why we push to get it early if you can. Any other questions for us?
I want to encourage that the parents that already have an FSA ID, say they created an FSA ID for themselves as students or for an older child, go in right now and just make sure that your contact information is up to date, so that when you're ready to sign and submit, you're not going to have trouble electronically signing. And also, another thing that we see, let's say parent one created the FSA ID and used their personal email address. But then you get into the FAFSA form and you're going through all your paperwork, and you get to the portion where it asks for a parent's email address. Use that same parent, the one who created the FSA ID, because if that's mom's email address and that's what's in the ID, when mom goes to sign the FAFSA, if dad's email address is within the FAFSA form itself, she's not going to be able to electronically sign.
Wait, Angie.
So make sure that you're being mindful of that as well, and everything in the ID matches what's in the FAFSA.
Okay, looks like we have another question. If one parent is a U.S. citizen and the other is a resident with a green card, do you recommend creating the ID for the U.S. citizen? Great question.
That is a great question. Yeah, that would be a little bit easier, especially if they're both in a household. However, when you're completing the FAFSA, if you're both in a household, both parents will still need to be listed. So you can put, I think it's like a series of 9s. The biggest thing is, if for that existing financial aid award package, as well as whatever is offered through the CSS profile, if there's still some type of need or gap between the funding and the tuition, the Parent Plus loan is always an option. Personally, I use that as an absolute last resort. I like to exhaust whatever dollars I have in my office. But whenever you're going to apply for that Parent Plus loan, not only do you have to have an FSA ID, it has to have a social, because it's a credit application that the parent is running. So if you don't have a social security number, then it's not even going to say you're not eligible. You're not going to be able to apply.
And remember that you do have to have a social security number to create an FSA ID this year. Some of that might be changing next year, we understand, but we're not going to worry about that right now. But if you want to electronically sign your child's FAFSA, I would select the U.S. citizen because they've created their ID and they can electronically sign. If you wanted the other parent who's not a U.S. resident to sign the student's FAFSA, they would have to print that signature page, manually sign, mail it to the department. Then it's just, creates some problems with the timing.
And another quick question, just for clarification, because I know some parents may be in this situation. I just want to clarify for myself also, because I'm not the FAFSA expert like you two, or CSS profile expert. If a parent was in college before, or they have an older sibling that was in college 10, 15 years, 20 years ago, that ID does not expire, right? They can still use that same ID, correct?
That is correct.
And
okay. Especially with that FSA ID, as Ann mentioned, you do need to have a social to apply for it. So it's linked. So all you can do is reset it. And either you have to answer your challenge questions or try and have them text or email a code. So whenever I'm going through a FAFSA completion event, I always tell the parents and the students at that point, go ahead and verify your email and verify your mobile number. That is going to take a lot of the weight out when you do the challenge questions. You have to wait 30 minutes. And if none of those options work, you'll have to call the help desk, and it does start off automated. They're lone staff. Some of them are still working virtual. So that's going to delay your chance to actually getting to a representative. You can contact the school that you're interested in. However, we only have so much flexibility in navigating you through that process. If you don't remember anything, it's a little bit harder. But whenever you're logging in, either you can log in using your FSA ID or the email that's associated with that account. So I would maybe text it to myself, put it in my drafts and my emails. I keep a planner where I have all my little passwords. Just keep it and remember it. And even if you do remember it, it'll expire at a certain point, and you'll have to update it. So it's very meticulous because of the fact it's tied to your social.
And also, that's such a good question. And somebody brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and I had to look it up. The FSA ID system was created in 2015. So if you were in college before 2015, you had a PIN, a personal identification number, and you have to now create an FSA ID. But if you apply for financial aid 2015 forward, you should have that FSA ID.
So what they have, if it was 15 years ago, it was an older sibling, that's a PIN. So this is something totally separate.
That's right. They are starting over. This is a more secure way to sign documents.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
When it first came out in 2015, we actually had to use the PIN to link it. So they've done away with that because they would have to contact, I think it's the IRS to get the PIN, and that takes a while.
Okay. Well, if no one has any other questions, if you don't have any questions, feel free to log off right now. Thank you so much for coming, parents and students. We hope this was helpful. If you have a question or two, feel free to stick around. We'll be here for another few minutes, okay? We will make this presentation available. I'll get it from Ms. Carmichael, and we'll make it available to you at Ben Franklin by midweek next week. Again, thank you so much for coming. We know your time is valuable. If you have a question or two, stick around. We'll be here for another minute or two, okay? Thank you. I'm seeing some thank yous. Thank you. I'm so glad this was helpful for some of you.
And I
Good night, everyone.
I'm sorry, I see one question that popped up that said, if mom had applied for financial aid in 2016, can she use her old account for this child? Yes. You should have created the FSA ID, but please go to the FSA ID website and check your contact information. Because if it's not going to match, if it's an old address or old phone number or old email, you're not going to be able to use it to electronically sign. Do that now before you start the FAFSA.
And remember, just because this presentation's over, you may have questions later when you get to the FAFSA, and you may say, uh-oh, I didn't think this question was coming. feel free to reach out to them. They're here to help. Okay. Myself, Ms. Bruno, Mr. Edwards will help as much as we can, but we're not the experts like they are. So that's why we defer sometimes. I see a few questions. 401k is considered as an asset in CSS, but not in FAFSA, correct?
Actually, for both.
For both, okay.
Mhm.
Is TOPS only for colleges in Louisiana? Yes.
Yes.
Has to be in state. That's the only way you can get TOPS is if you stay in state. They want to use a little incentive to keep these kids in state. So yeah. Any other questions? Again, if you don't have any, feel free to log off. We'll make this presentation available to you next week. We're going to hang around another minute or two just in case anyone has any questions. Thank you again so much for coming. I know your time is valuable.
And I know some people have asked personal questions that they want answered independently. So please feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer what I can. And what I can't, I'll send on to the professionals like Charmaine.
Just move it up the chain.
Yes, that's right.
I know that's what I'll do. I'm like, I think Miss Carmichael can answer this one. I don't know the answer.
And when I
Well,
can't, I
Christy,
go right up the top.
Christy has a great question.
Mhm.
So she did a FAFSA 15 years ago and she can't remember her password or PIN. Will she be able to start a new application? Unfortunately, you cannot start a new application. You will have to still get it reset. So if you go to the fsaid.ed.gov website, you would just select forgot my password, retrieve your password, forgot my username, retrieve your username, and then worst case scenario, you'll have to contact their help desk.
Ooh, good question. Follow up. Will the 401k reduce the financial aid you could receive?
I'm
We're
going
going
let
to the
Charmaine
expert on
take
this
that
one.
I wish it was a more diplomatic way to say it. So what they're looking at is the household size versus the number in college versus the tax and untaxed income that's supporting that household size.
Yeah.
So you can have a 401k, but if you're a family of 8, you may still be eligible for need-based aid versus my husband and I having one with 1 kid. So so they do factor in all of those things. And especially like with the FAFSA, they're looking at whether or not you're receiving the lifetime learners credit versus the American Opportunity. There's about 13 untaxed income questions that come into play because they're trying to gauge and get a good picture of what to make available for the students. And especially since with the existing Pell Grant, with existing, Pell Grant and loan portfolio that the government has, even though it's, this is the max amount you can get each year, institutions is unlimited. As long as we have 1 million Pell eligible students, we can award it as long as they're eligible for it. So that's their way of kind of like, I guess, gauging and issuing the money in an equitable manner. And then with CSS, it's the same way. The institutions will take the information, they use it at their discretion. But what to keep in mind with scholarships, they are need-based and merit. So scholastically, if you're doing well, you can still receive quite a few scholarships like Thurgood Marshall, UNICEF,
Jackie Robinson,
Wells Fargo, Eddie Robinson. It's so many merit-based scholarships that are out there. I tell students it doesn't stop when you're entering college. It's an ongoing process.
Yep.
I have a little baggie of jump drives. I got about 20 in here. You take one. Okay, you have a folder for scholarships. Okay, this is about my interests. This is about my career goals. This is about the time I felt I was a scientist. Like, keep it organized, because once you're matriculating in college, my institution, for example, or Southern System, as we learn the scholarship opportunities, we send it out through marketing. If it's in the middle of midterm or even finals, and you see a scholarship you meet the eligibility for, but you have a small window of time to apply because you're studying for midterms or finals, you still want to submit that application. You'll have a skeletal that you can start with, and you can tweak it for what they need.
Mhm, mhm. Well, FAFSA will let you know if some information does not match from the application based on your tax profile, if some things were answered incorrectly.
Yes and no. So to a certain extent, like if it's duplicated income, it doesn't always catch it. It's at the school's discretion, because as we come across a record, even if you're not selected for verification, if we see conflicting information, we're supposed to resolve it when we catch it. So that actually doesn't trigger a flag. You would think it would. However, if you're putting the adjusted gross is equal to the taxes paid is equal to your wages earned from work, that will reject. And if it rejects, it's not going to give you an ELC, even though I know they're going away with that. They're going back to the index. You're not going to get a complete confirmation with an estimated award. It's going to tell you contact the schools that's listed. You have issues with your FAFSA. In 2 to 3 days, once the student aid report is generated, you're going to have a series of comment codes that's going to be available, and it's going to tell you all of their findings. So you can actually go in and fix it, or if you have any questions, then just contact that financial aid office and they can walk you through.
I think I see our last question. I guess I do not understand. So why is the retirement fund considered as an asset if it's supposed to be used for the parent's future?
So it's not if you're contributing, it's if you're withdrawing.